Hello BookTube, this is Roz and this is another journey through books. It's about time I remember to introduce myself at the beginning of a video, especially with all my new subscribers. I'd like to send a nice welcome out to all my new subscribers. I'm almost sitting at 300, which is something I never quite pictured as a BookTube channel. I don't know why. But anyway, let me get on with my reading wrap up. So before I start with the main one, let me start with the book that doesn't quite match the rest, and that is Dreaming of Light by Jayne Bauling. Now this is one of our school set work books, and why do they make books like this, school set works? I love reading. I really love reading. This book could put me off reading. But anyway, what it's about. So it's about boys that are stolen, kidnapped, from neighbouring South African countries and some in South Africa as well. They are from Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, etc. and they were forced to work as illegal miners, otherwise known as zama-zamas. And our main character, Regile Dlamini, he is only 18 and he is put in charge of this new gang of recruits who are obviously now working underground in the mine, and these boys can be there from between 3 to 6 months. And the idea is interesting, but man, this was so repetitive and so shallow that I don't know how I'm actually going to get involved and teach this, besides the fact that symbolism for hope. But yeah, it had the audacity to tell me that Regile was a dynamic character, and I can tell you that I can name 1,000 books which have characters that are far more dynamic than he was, because he was forever telling us how cold he was or whatnot, but he never was. So there was no real change. But anyway, so this one's done and dusted, now just to teach the bloody thing. And then we start with the books from March Mystery Madness, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was best timing going for it, although I think I'll be saying the same thing in June. But I just absolutely enjoyed it. I always enjoy mystery stories. They're my guilty pleasure read. Not that I feel guilty in the slightest. And yeah, so let's get on with those. So the first book I picked, well, in this order. This isn't the order I read them. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Night Work by Laurie R. King. And this is the 4th book in the Kate Martinelli series. Now, in this story, we have men who are being murdered, pleasant change, and the only thing that these men have in common is that they are abusive. So, a little bit of sympathies towards the murderer there, right? And when I mean abusive, they're either wife beaters or rapists or things like along those lines. So that part was interesting. It was a pleasant change because usually women are the victims, and it was nice having a serial killer after men for a change. This was the first Laurie R. King that I've picked up, and I looked through Goodreads and I saw that this one actually has the lowest ratings of pretty much all her books. So I went in knowing that this was not considered one of her best works. But having said that, I was not really disappointed actually. I could see that some people could say this was very research heavy because she did go into a lot of detail about Kali and Ishtar goddesses, and you know, there was a lot of academic discussion on performances and things, and I could understand why this might not be the favored read. But I liked the twist on it because it was strange having, yeah, that big spoiler thing happen. So, so how do you discuss crime novels in detail without killing it? Because the whole point of reading crime novels is to solve it before the cop does, isn't it? At least that's why I read them. But I thought I'd read just a little bit here at the beginning. This is the prologue before the story starts, and it's just the first 2 paragraphs. And it says here, the image on the wall was enough to give a man nightmares. It showed a woman of sorts, but a woman who would have made a playboy shrivel, given pause to the most ardent feminist, and had Freud scrambling to retract his plaintive query concerning what woman wanted. What this lady wanted was blood. Her skin was dark, so deep a blue that it seemed black against the crisp, bright, bloodied waves that splashed against her muscular calves. Around her hips she wore a belt strung with human hands that had been hacked off at the wrists. Her neck was looped with a necklace of skulls. Her wild black hair made a matted tangle from which serpents peeped, and from her right ear hung a cluster of dry bones. 4 arms emerged from her strong shoulders in a manner of Hindu deities and the half-joking fantasy of busy mothers the world around. And all 20 of her dagger-long fingernails were red, the same blood-red as the sea around her. In her lower right hand she held a cast-iron skillet, wielding it like a weapon. Her upper left grasped the freshly severed head of a man. So that's what you call quite an introduction. I quite enjoyed it. The only thing is, I started this, well, this was my first book by her, so I knew nothing about Kate or her circumstances, etc. And I assumed initially, I suppose because it's the norm, that her partner Lee, which is a gender neutral name, was a male, and it took me a while to realize that Kate was lesbian, and I had to rework my visionings and things like that. So there was some assumption that the reader knew what was happening, but not too much. As far as the crime and the situation went, I fitted in just fine. So if you do pick one of these up in the middle, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. The next one is not quite a crime. Well, it is a crime, but it's not quite. The next one was First Among Sequels by Jasper Fforde. Now this is the 5th in the Thursday Next series, which means that once again it's going to be very difficult to talk about this book. So what can I say? People are not reading. Reality TV is suddenly becoming scholastic. Isn't that a scary thought? And yeah, somebody killed Sherlock Holmes, and Tempe Brennan had somebody try and kill her too, and yeah, a vote has been taken to do horrible things that we don't want to have happen as readers in the book world. But I can't really go into more detail than that. In fact, that might have been spoilery for previous books. So this story takes place 14 years after book 4. What I enjoyed was seeing Thursday in an established career. It's established. It's just, it's well hidden. And having an established relationship with her husband, because, you know, so often, you know, the topsy-turvy relationship seems to be one of the premises for the characters' you know, personal life, especially in police books. Most of them are divorced, or, you know, struggling to keep things together, or, you know, the wife is complaining because they're forever out at work. This is such a difficult book to talk about because it has moved so far away from the first one, which was the Air Affair. As a whole, I have a bit of mixed feelings about the series. I enjoy it for fun. Books 2 through to 4 are basically held together more with literary in-jokes, which I do enjoy, but they're not very plot-based, which is strange because this is such a complex world, because you have our world. Don't you love all these air quotation marks? We have our world, which is nothing like our world because time travel exists, and the Crimean War went on for about 200 years or something like that, you know, so it's a different world to ours. But then you also have the book world, where Thursday can go into the books, and she has a job there as well. And so, you know, it's such a complex premise for this story that I have to take my hat off to Jasper Fforde for attempting it. And he does a good job of it. I just don't know if it's a fantastic job of it. I don't know if what I enjoy being the literary in-jokes is perhaps detriment to the plot, but then is what keeps me coming back. Although this one had fewer. Anyway, moving on. The next book is Lives Lost by Britta Bolt. So this is our Britta Bowler from BookTube, and Andre Bolt, who's actually a South African. So thumbs up there. This is the second book in the Peter Posthumous series, and in this story we have a young man who is found murdered, and the woman who finds him, she has provided accommodation to him and other young folks who have basically homeless, been misguided along the way, drug addicts, etc. And she provides accommodation for them. And she is held as guilty by the police. And what makes the story interesting is that we know that Britta is a lawyer, and it was very interesting having to deal with a lawyer who was not doing her job in this one. And what I also liked was how Peter Posthumous has come across as a lot more real. It seems like he is now feeling more like a developed character. And his relationship with Anne, oh, was it Anne? I think it's Anne, the lady at the Dollarhunt. It seems a lot more established, a lot more real as well, along with his niece. So I quite enjoyed that. But what is also really brilliant with this is that it's very atmospheric. I've never been to Amsterdam myself, but I feel like I've been to Amsterdam from having read this. And yeah, I also liked how Peter is coming across a little bit more Sherlock Holmesy. So that was pretty nice. The next book is Faithful Place by Tana French, and this is the third in the Dublin Murder series. And in this story we followed Frank McKay, who we met in the second book, which was The Likeness. He was the guy who put Cassie Maddox undercover. And in this story, it also covers a personal history. 20 or so years beforehand, Frank was supposed to run away with his girlfriend Rosie, and she didn't arrive. And he finds a letter that he assumes was addressed to himself saying that, you know, she changed her mind, wasn't coming. So he left without her. And we know that she never arrived. And her body is then discovered 20 years later. And although he is not actually a part of the murder squad itself, he is undercover, you still follow him as he tries to get to the bottom of this. And there were many things that I actually enjoyed in this. For one, it had a nice pleasant blend between the humor and what was serious. And I really enjoyed his relationship as a father with his daughter. Although 9-year-old Holly seemed to have a lot more wisdom than a 9-year-old should have. But one of the other things that I really did enjoy was the young cop that he tried to manipulate into giving him inside information and things like that he wasn't privy to. And this guy wasn't an easy pushover just for the sake of moving the plot. So I really liked that as well. And then the last book that I read was The Unexpected Inheritance of Inspector Chopra. And this is by Vaseem Khan. He's British, although he spent his formative years in India. So he set this in India, in Mumbai. And, oh, did I really enjoy this. Ashwin Chopra, okay, well, let's start off. Ashwin Chopra is just on the verge of retiring. Well, it's the day of his retirement. And a woman comes in to find out what is happening with the investigation about her son's murder. And he goes home after this, finished no longer a policeman, and he discovers that he has inherited a baby elephant. It's only 8 months old, Ganesha. And oh, this elephant was just amazing. I loved it. So you're following him, and I'm going to put this book down. You see what it looks like? Okay, I'm going to put the book down. And what was nice is that Inspector Chopra is actually a very, very morally strong character in a very corrupt world. And now that he's retired, he doesn't know what to do with himself because his identity is policeman. Well, he got all the way up to inspector. And so obviously he is going to investigate things as well, because he agreed with the mother that, you know, maybe her son's murder would not get the attention that it should, and obviously that was proven correct. So he goes off and he does the investigating himself. This had the feel of a Bollywood action movie without the singing and dancing, thank goodness. But you had the sexy, good-looking Indian hero and his pretty younger wife, and her story also had more meat to it. She's a woman who's wanted to have children but is infertile. She's unable to. And for folks who said that their pet hates in stories were the instant fix, suddenly we're pregnant, this is a good one to read. That doesn't happen. Sorry, how do you talk about stuff without giving away spoilers? But anyway, the side with the elephant, look, it was a bit far-fetched in places, but I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't have changed it. It was really fun to read. Ridiculous, but fun. And it was what I really was in the mood for. And the other thing that I need to show you with this is that you have your chapters. Let me get to a chapter somewhere. There we go. So you have your chapters, which start there with the little elephant at the top, and then you have a few pages, and then you have a little page break with another little elephant, and you can just go 2-3 pages on. I chose a long one, what do you know? And you can get more of them, and this just makes it move so nicely, because not only do you sit as the reader with the question of, do I do one more chapter, or do I go to bed like I should, you know, as a responsible adult? Whereas now you've got, it's just 2 pages until the next little elephant. I can do that. And then it's just, just one more page. And then, it's just 3 more. And the next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the blooming morning, and you're supposed to be getting up to be productive. Yeah, but that worked really well though. And because he cut it like that, it saves a lot of unnecessary waffle. He keeps the story moving, which I liked. Yeah, he didn't waste time at all. So those were my reads for the rest of the month. I've only done one wrap up this month, which is a little bit bad of me, but I don't need to say again that I've been busy. But that's about it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.